For this tutorial, we're going to be using sharpness, or at least the lack of sharpness, to simulate depth of field. So let's get started. The image that we're going to look at here is this image of the elephant seals, where we want to isolate the seagull from the rest of the image. Let's go ahead and open it now. It's opening in RAW, and I'm going to do a couple things here in RAW, or in camera raw. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this image down a little bit, and I'm going to crop it to a 2:3 aspect ratio, which is the same aspect ratio as the original. And we'll just draw our little marquee tool here, and now we have our crop. I'm going to leave everything else pretty much nominal here, except I'm going to go in and I am going to work on my sharpness here in camera raw. So let's double click the zoom tool to bring us up to our maximum here, and actually that's pretty sharp. Let's make it a little bit sharper here, and let's try to smooth out some of the noise and the luminance in here. Okay, let's open the image, and now as soon as this image opens, I'm just going to clean up my background a little bit by going in and closing the bridge, and we'll come back into Photoshop. Now, the filter that we're going to be using to do this is going to be called the lens blur filter. And let me show you how that works. We go into blur and we go to lens blur. And what I do there is I get a new dialog that opens up, and I can actually blur this image so that it looks like it's an out-of-focus image. And you can see here by changing the radius I can make it pretty much blurred. And let's let that generate. Okay. And you can see that I'm blurring out my image. Well, the thing is, I'm blurring the whole image, and what I want to do is I want to keep the central portion of the image, especially around this seagull, sharp. And you can see that I can use a source for a depth map that will define where the blur is going to be. And one of my options here is a layer mask. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cancel this, and I'm going to create a layer mask to generate this blur. Okay, now the first thing that I want to do is I want to duplicate this layer. I'm just going to hit Command or Control J to do that, and I'm going to put a layer mask on the layer. Well, one thing I can do here is I can just go in and I can paint on this layer mask. Let's bring our opacity up to 100%. I can use my brush tool and I can paint on this layer mask in black. And what that'll do, let's hide the background layer, is that will hide the bird. So I can go in now and I can go back into the filter. Let's go back to lens blur. I'm going to hold my option key down and just click on the top here so it'll give me my settings from before. And you see that this is the mask. But what we want is we want the image. Oops, I'm going to hit cancel there. And let's go to the image, make sure that that's selected. And now we're going to go back in. I'm going to hold down my option or alt key and just click on lens blur up here. And here, when it generates, you can see that I'm still blurred, except the seagull is in focus. Well, this is nice and it isolates the seagull, but that's not really what I want, because it doesn't really look like this has happened in a lens. So let's cancel this. And now what I want to do is let's just fill this with white so that we don't have anything in there now. And I'm going to create a transition. And the way that I create that transition where it blends is I'm going to go here to my gradient tool, and I'm going to come up with a gradient. And you see that I've got a gradient here that's black in the center and white on the ends. Now what this will do is this will make a transition where I'm out of focus, in focus, and out of focus. Let me show you how I created this. First of all, let's take this off, and here, let's just go to the third box up here, and this gives us a black to white gradient. But as you could see a moment ago, this is not what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the endpoint, the left endpoint, to the center where it goes to 50% here. And I'm going to create a new endpoint just by clicking right on the end here. Whoops. Just clicking right here at the end, dragging it all the way over, and now I can change that color to white. And the way that I do that is just click on the white part here, or just put in 255 in red, green, and blue. So I can say OK, and now I have my gradient. See this little diamond? What this will allow me to do is change the center point of that gradient so that I want my focus to be a fairly narrow band of focus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that at about 60% here. That's 61. We can just type that in at 60. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now, I don't see a diamond over there, so all I'm going to do is click on the center box, and there's my diamond. And if I put it at 60%, it'll go in the wrong way, so I'm going to put it at 40% right here. So now I have my gradient. It's going to be clear in the center, and it's going to be biased toward the center, and the ends will be white, so that they will be fully revealed. So let's go ahead and click OK here, and now all I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down my Shift key so that I get a straight vertical line here, and I'm going to draw a vertical line. And there's my focus. Well, it's a little bit high, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that again, and I'll start right at the top of the bird's head, and we'll go down like that. Okay, now you can see the bird's head is going to be in focus. Well, it's not going to be in focus because it's not covered by the gradient all the way. And I do want it covered by the gradient. So what I'm going to do is let's just go in here a little bit closer. And now I'm going to paint on my layer mask in black so that I can get rid of that bird altogether, because I want that bird to be totally in focus. And the way I do that is I hit B for my brush tool, and I'm going to paint with black at 100% opacity around this bird. So now what I'm going to do here is I made my cursor, or I made my brush a little bit smaller here, and now I'm just going to paint out the bird's beak. And again, you're going to be a lot more careful than I'm going to be here, because I'm just trying to show you real quickly how to do it. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be absolutely taking the most care that you can when you do it yourself. Okay, so now there's our bird. And what we're going to do now is we are going to hit a Command or Control 0 so that we see our whole image again. And we're going to go back into the filter. Let's make sure our image is selected. We go back up to our lens blur filter, and I'm just going to click on the lens blur, holding my Option or Alt key down so I get my old settings. And, well, it's blurred on top, and there we go. And here, this is like shooting with a 500 or 600 millimeter lens, wide open, because you can see that our background is blurred, our foreground is blurred, but the bird is sharp. And we also see a band of sharpness going across the image where the bird is. Okay, so now what I can do is I can go in and I can change my blur focal distance. Let's just see what happens. When I pull that to the right, it really messes things up. I don't like that at all. Let's pull it all the way to the left and see what happens. If I pull it all the way to the left, the bird is very sharp. Well, it's not quite all the way to the left. Let's go all the way to the left. And this gives us our maximum sharpness on the bird. When I change the radius is going to change the amount of blur in the background. So let's make it a little less blurry so that we can see what these are in the background, see that they are elephant seals. But we still want to keep them blurred enough so that they don't distract us from the bird. And we can also set the roundness of the aperture here, and we can also set the shape of our aperture. I'm choosing a octagon aperture, and then I can go in for my specular highlights, and we can see what happens there. We can maybe wipe those out and change a little bit of things here. Like you see, if I lower my threshold, it just totally wipes everything out, so I don't want to do that. Let's turn that down a little bit. And if I wanted, I could put a little bit of noise in here to represent film grain. But since we're shooting digital and we don't have film grain, we don't need that. So now let's bring our noise down to 0. And we're done. Let's take this back into Photoshop. Takes a little while to do here. And you can see that when I put my bottom layer on, there's our image. Our bird is sharp. Let's bring it up to 50% here so that we can get a little better resolution on it. We can see that our bird is sharp, and we can see that we have part of our background sharp also. So that is how you do depth of field using a combination of sharpness and blur.